The lawnmower I pushed into the retention pond was worth about $600, and it wasn't even mine, it was Danny's, my son-in-law's, the good one with the self-propelled drive he'd bragged about for a year. It sank into 11 feet of murky water behind his own house in under 4 seconds. My daughter Kayla screamed so loud a neighbor came out onto his porch to see what happened. But she wasn't screaming at Danny. She was screaming at me. And here's the part nobody at that cookout could wrap their head around. 15 minutes earlier, they'd all watched a 66-year-old man stand completely still while his granddaughter's birthday cake got knocked off the table and stepped on, and I hadn't said a single word. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't even blinked much. And nobody there could have guessed that my silence was going to end with a splash. If you've ever bitten your tongue so many times you forgot what your own opinion sounded like, stick around, because this one's for you. And if you're the kind of person who calls the people they love by name instead of some polite nothing, then you already know how this feels before I even start telling it. So call me Grandpa Ray if you want. That's what my grandkids call me. And that's who I was that whole summer, standing at the edge of somebody else's yard trying to hold a family together with both hands. My name's Raymond Doyle. I'm 66 years old, and I spent 31 years as a machinist up in Toledo, running lathes and mills for an auto parts supplier, until my knees told me it was time to stop climbing in and out of the pits. I retired 4 years ago with a pension that's smaller every year, the news tells me, a hearing aid in my left ear that whistles when I forget to clean it, and hands that still remember the weight of a micrometer even when they're just holding a coffee mug. I live alone now, in a 2-bedroom rambler out past Sylvania that my late wife Donna and I bought the year Kayla was born. Donna picked the maple tree out front. I built the screened porch myself over 2 summers, one Saturday at a time, so she'd have somewhere shady to do her crossword puzzles. Donna's been gone 6 years now. Pancreatic cancer, the fast kind, 11 weeks from the diagnosis to the funeral. I won't pretend that part of my life doesn't still ache like a bad knee in the cold. Kayla's my only daughter, 34 now, works as a dental hygienist, married Danny Kessler about 7 years ago. Danny sells commercial insurance, the kind of job where he's always got a lanyard on and a phone in his hand, always got some big number he's chasing. For years I told myself he was just ambitious. Ambitious men rub some people the wrong way, I figured. And maybe that was on me. Maybe I was just an old-fashioned guy who didn't understand how young folks talk to each other now. That Saturday was my granddaughter Ellie's 7th birthday. Danny and Kayla wanted to do it up nice, rented a bounce house, had it catered even, little sliders and a taco bar in their backyard out in Perrysburg, the fancy side of town where the lots are big enough that you can't hear your neighbor's dog barking. I showed up early like I always do, helped Danny set up folding tables, helped blow up 30 balloons until I was lightheaded, the whole bit. I love that girl more than I know how to say out loud. She calls me Grandpa Ray Ray. On account of when she was 2, she couldn't get the second syllable right, and it stuck. The trouble started around 4 in the afternoon, when the cake came out. Kayla had ordered a unicorn cake from a bakery downtown, 3 tiers, cost more than my first car payment probably. Everybody was singing happy birthday. Ellie was grinning ear to ear in her little paper crown, and right as they went to cut the first slice, Danny's father-in-law joke landed wrong, or so he claimed later. What actually happened is Danny was showing off for a couple of his buddies from the insurance office, doing some kind of dance move with a serving knife in his hand, and he clipped the cake table hard enough that the whole bottom tier slid off onto the patio stones and split open like a dropped melon. Ellie burst into tears. Kayla gasped, and Danny, instead of apologizing, instead of even looking embarrassed, he laughed. Big loud laugh. Looked right at me, because I guess I must have made some kind of face, and said, "Relax, Ray. It's just cake. We'll order pizza. Nobody's going to remember this by Monday." Like I was the one who needed calming down. Like the problem in that yard was my expression, and not the smashed dessert or the sobbing 7-year-old. I didn't say anything. I want you to understand that about me, because it matters for everything that comes after. I've never been a yeller. 31 years on a factory floor teaches you that the men who yell are usually the ones who can't fix anything. They just make noise, while somebody quieter does the actual work. So I knelt down. I helped Kayla scoop the ruined cake into a trash bag. I told Ellie we'd get her a scoop of ice cream from the freezer instead, and she could have the rest of her cake tomorrow, and I got her smiling again inside of 10 minutes. I thought that was the end of it. Then, about 20 minutes later, Danny's push mower, the same one he'd mentioned 3 separate times that afternoon, self-propelled, top of the line, $400 blade system, whatever it was, got wheeled out of the garage because one of his buddies wanted to see it. And somehow, in the middle of all that showing off, Danny backed it right over Ellie's little scooter that she'd left in the grass, crushed the front wheel flat, and the girl started crying all over again, this time worse than the cake. And Danny turned to her, in front of everybody, in front of me, and said, "Ellie, honey, it's just a scooter. You'll get a new one. Stop crying. You're embarrassing yourself." 7 years old, told she was embarrassing herself. At her own birthday party, something in my chest went very quiet and very still, the way a machine sounds right before a bearing seizes. I didn't say a word. I walked over, picked up that mower by the handle, wheeled it calm as you please across the yard, and pushed it straight into the retention pond behind their fence. Watched it glug down into the water and disappear. Took me about 4 seconds. Kayla screamed my name. Danny's buddies went dead silent, and Danny himself just stood there with his mouth hanging open like a carp, sputtering something about how that mower cost $600. "Are you out of your mind, Ray? What is wrong with you?" I looked at him and said, real calm, "It's just a mower. You'll get a new one. Don't embarrass yourself." Then I told Ellie, "Happy birthday," kissed the top of her head, and I drove home. 10 years ago, if you'd told me I'd do something like that at my own granddaughter's birthday party, I'd have called you a liar to your face. I've always been the type of man who fixes things, not the type who breaks them. But there's a version of quiet that isn't peace. It's just erosion. And I didn't understand that yet. Not fully. Not that afternoon. I understood it about 6 weeks later, and that's the story I actually want to tell you. I drove the 40 minutes home from Perrysburg without the radio on. Just me and the hum of the tires and that image of the mower going under, over and over. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my hands were shaking a little. Not from anger exactly. More like the aftershock of doing something I'd never once let myself do in 66 years, which is put my own dignity ahead of keeping everybody comfortable. My phone started blowing up before I even got my shoes off. Texts from Kayla, 3 of them back to back. First one just said, "Dad, seriously?" Second one, "Danny is furious. Do you understand what you did?" Third one, "I need you to call me tonight and apologize to him. This is not okay." I sat down at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that went cold before I touched it, and I read those 3 texts about a dozen times, doing the math on everything that wasn't in them. Not one, "Dad, are you okay?" Not one, "I'm sorry Danny said that to Ellie." Just apologize to him. The house was real quiet that night. The kind of quiet you only notice after you've had somebody in it for 30-some years and then suddenly you haven't. Donna's reading chair still sits in the corner of the front room. Same faded cushion. Same little burn mark on the arm from where she used to rest her cigarette back before she quit. I never could bring myself to get rid of anything. Her handwriting still on the recipe cards in the kitchen drawer. Her coat still hanging by the back door, which I know is a strange thing for a grown man to admit, but there it is. I picked up my phone around 9 that night, and there was a post already circulating. Some cousin of Danny's had put up a thing about toxic older relatives who can't control their emotions. No names. But everybody in that family group chat knew exactly who it was about. Danny's mother left a little comment underneath it, something about how age doesn't excuse cruelty. And one of Kayla's coworkers, somebody I'd never even met, commented, "Some people just get bitter when they get old." Bitter. I turned that word over in my head for a long while that night. Bitter's the word people use when they don't want to ask themselves what actually made a quiet man snap. I did what I always do when my feelings get too loud to hold with my bare hands, which is I found something to fix. There was a squeak in the screen door that had been bothering me since spring, so I got my oil can and my flathead, and I sat out on that porch. Donna and I built together, and I worked on that hinge until my knuckles were sore, and the whole time, the same film kept running behind my eyes. The cake sliding, Ellie crying, Danny telling a 7-year-old she was embarrassing herself, Kayla screaming my name instead of asking if I was all right. Around 1 the next afternoon, my neighbor Walter Puskas showed up in my open garage door. Walter's 73, retired from Jeep, spends his mornings walking a beagle named Chester, who has never once in his life walked in a straight line. Walter had been at more than one holiday dinner over the years, knew the family a little. "You busy?" he asked. I held up the hinge, working the screw loose. "Trying to save a squeak from retirement," I said. He came in and stood with his hands in his coveralls pockets, which worried me some, because Walter's a man who can talk to a fence post for 20 minutes, and he looked like he'd rather be somewhere else entirely. Been chewing on something, he said. Haven't we all? I said. He didn't smile back. Ray, that mower thing yesterday. You didn't hear the whole story. I set the screwdriver down. I was out front of your daughter's place 2 weeks back, Walter said, dropping off some tomatoes for Kayla, and Danny was in the driveway with a couple fellas from his office. They didn't know I was there. I was around the side by the garden bed. I only caught a piece of it, but I heard your name. What piece? I said. And my neighbor of almost 15 years looked me dead in the eye and said, Danny told those two men, and I'm quoting close as I can remember, Ray's not going to be driving much longer the way his hands shake. And when he finally can't handle that house, that's a paid-off 4-bedroom sitting there doing nothing. Kayla's the only kid, so it's basically already ours. For a second, I genuinely thought I'd misheard him. My hearing's not what it used to be. Words slipped past me in a noisy room. But Walter and I were standing 3 feet apart in a dead silent garage, and I heard every syllable clean as a bell. I laughed once, not because anything was funny, but because a body's got to do something with a piece of news like that, and laughing was what mine picked. My house. The house where Kayla learned to ride her bike in that driveway. The house where I held Donna's hand while she took her last breath in the front bedroom. Already itemized. Already assigned. A line item in some other man's 5-year plan, and he was just waiting on the vacancy. I didn't sleep much that night. I sat up with an old photo album, the kind with the sticky plastic pages that don't stick anymore, and took the whole tour. Kayla at 5, gap-toothed, holding up a macaroni necklace she made me for Father's Day. Kayla at 16, rolling her eyes at her prom pictures. Kayla at 26, laughing in the backyard next to her mother about something I've long since lost the memory of. Then the newer pages. Kayla and Danny at Thanksgiving. Kayla and Danny at Christmas. Kayla and Danny in my own kitchen, his arms slung around her waist, his smile switched on like a porch light, and me somewhere at the edge of every frame, usually the one holding the camera, half out of the shot. I ran my thumb over one old photograph of Donna and asked the empty house, out loud, did I miss this? Did I let it happen? I don't know who exactly I was asking. God, myself, Donna, probably all three at once. Had I gotten so scared of losing my daughter that I'd shrunk myself down small enough to fit in the corner of my own family portrait? I picked up the phone to call Kayla, and my thumb hovered right over her name for a good long minute. Then I set it back down. I made a decision that night that had nothing to do with keeping anybody else comfortable. First one I'd made like that in longer than I want to admit. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to beg for anybody to see my side. I was going to pay attention, quiet and careful, the way you listen to an engine that's about to tell you the truth whether you want to hear it or not. Because if Danny thought getting older made a man harmless, he was confusing quiet for weak. And 31 years around industrial machinery teaches you those are not the same thing at all. After that, I stopped seeing Danny as just rude, and started seeing him as a man with a schedule. Every compliment he gave me after that had a due date on it. Every little favor was an invoice waiting to print. I told nobody what Walter had said. I confronted nobody. From the outside, my life looked exactly the same as it had the week before. Underneath, I was running diagnostics. The first pattern showed up fast. My future became everybody's favorite topic of conversation all of a sudden. Kayla stopped by one Wednesday after her shift, brought me a coffee, and for a good half hour it was wonderful, just like old times. Her telling me about a nervous patient, me telling her about the tomatoes coming in. Then, stirring her coffee without looking up, she said, "Have you given any thought to maybe downsizing, Dad? This place is a lot of house for one person." "Keeps me busy," I said. "Your knees, though, those stairs to the basement." "I appreciate you worrying," I said. And then it came, dropped in soft as a weather report. "Do you still have the deed paperwork filed somewhere, or is it in a safe deposit box? Just curious, in case anything ever happened." There it was. "Somewhere safe," I said, easy as anything, and gave her nothing else, and watched a little flicker of disappointment cross my daughter's face, a flicker I'd have missed a month earlier without even trying. Donna always said Kayla was a terrible liar. Turns out she wasn't much better at hiding an assignment either. The next Sunday, Danny showed up at my house unannounced, first time in probably a year, carrying a bottle of scotch that cost more than I spend on groceries in a week. First gift he'd ever given me that wasn't wrapped up in some kind of favor. He admired my garden, asked about my truck, Offered to have his landscaping guy come mow my lawn for free, no charge, don't even worry about it, Ray. I'm good, I said. I like doing it myself. And I caught it. The quick little glance he threw toward nothing in particular, the look people give when a script isn't going the way they rehearsed it in the car on the drive over. That glance bothered me more than the mower comment ever could have, because insults are weather, but glances like that are climate. A week after that he tried again, wandering over while I had the hood up on my truck. You still do all this yourself, huh? He said. You know, houses out past Sylvania are pulling crazy numbers right now. You could sell, grab yourself a nice condo down in Florida, not have to deal with any of this. Never cared much for Florida, I said, and kept my head under the hood. He laughed that laugh he does at work functions, the one that isn't really a laugh. Well, you won't want to keep up with all this forever. I straightened up and looked at him a second longer than was comfortable for either of us. Danny, I said, I've lived in that house 31 years. The day I don't want it anymore, you'll be the first to know. His smile went a little stiff around the edges. Fair enough, he said, and left about 5 minutes later. That conversation sat with me for days, not because it scared me, but because it sounded rehearsed, like a listing presentation he'd practiced somewhere before he ever got out of his car. The following Tuesday, I had an appointment already on the books with Marian Alderidge, my attorney of almost 18 years, the woman who'd handled Donna's estate, who once beat me at gin rummy so bad I still bring it up. I'd gone in for something routine, updating a beneficiary form on an old policy. Marian finished the paperwork, slid the folder across her desk, and then she leaned back in her chair and said, I've been going back and forth on whether to mention something to you. My stomach tightened right up. Go ahead, I said. Your son-in-law called this office a couple months back. About what? I asked. He didn't ask about your file specifically, Marian said carefully. He asked general questions. What kind of general? The kind people ask, she said, when they're curious how guardianship works for an aging parent. He wanted to understand what happens when a court decides an older homeowner isn't capable of managing his own finances anymore. He asked whether a person moving into assisted living changes who legally owns the house. I sat very still in that chair. My jaw got tight enough to crack a walnut. What did you tell him? I asked. The only thing I legally could, Marian said, with just the ghost of a smile. Nothing. He never even said your name outright. He didn't have to, I said. We sat there a minute in that silence together, two people who'd both been around long enough to read the same page without needing it spelled out. Finally, Marian said, Ray, I don't like assuming the worst about somebody's family. Neither do I said. But those aren't curiosity questions. No, she agreed. They're logistics. I drove home slow that evening, not because of traffic, but because every mile dissolved one more excuse I'd been propping up for years. Maybe he didn't mean it that way. Maybe it's just how he talks. Maybe Kayla will straighten him out. Maybe I'm too sensitive about all this. One by one, gone. Every last one of them. That night, I stood out in my garage a long while, my favorite room in the house, tools hanging right where my hands expect to find them, and I picked up a framed picture from our 25th anniversary, Donna laughing because I'd burned the first batch of burgers that summer. I ran my thumb over the glass and said out loud, They think getting old means getting easy to move. Next morning I called Marian before 8. I want to make some changes, I told her. What kind? She asked. The kind, I said, that makes sure nobody ever again mistakes my quiet for a signature. She was quiet a second and then said, I'll clear my afternoon. Here's the thing that surprised me most about all of it. None of that paperwork was about getting even with anybody. Marian never once treated it that way either. She asked me one question that reframed the whole business for me. What outcome lets you sleep at night, Ray? And I thought on it honest and said, I don't want to punish my daughter. I just never again want somebody planning out my life without asking the man who's actually living it. So that's what we built. Across 3 meetings and a sit-down with an estate planner, a revocable trust with an independent trustee, nobody from the family, no leverage for anybody to pull. Updated medical directives, rewritten power of attorney. Every single document saying the same quiet sentence underneath all the legal language, which is, nobody gets to step in over Raymond Doyle because they've decided on their own they know better than he does. No traps, no recordings, no dramatics. Just an old man locking his own front door from the inside, finally. And I'll tell you something strange. The day those papers got signed, Danny got smaller in my head, and for the first time in months, my world grew back out past the edges of him. Walter showed up that Saturday with 2 coffees and 1 question. "You still got that old Ford out back under the tarp?" "Needs a carburetor," I said. "There's a swap meet out in Fremont next weekend," he said, and shrugged the way men our age do when they're being careful with each other's loneliness without saying so. "Maybe it's time." I almost said no, out of pure habit. Then I heard Donna clear as the radio, telling me I was allowed to have a hobby too. So the following Saturday, Walter and I stood in a gravel lot full of old Fords and Chevys, drinking gas station coffee out of styrofoam cups, listening to strangers argue about carburetors like it was foreign policy. Nobody there asked what my house was worth. Nobody priced my watch. A silver-haired fella spent 20 minutes telling me about restoring a Mustang with his grandson, and another one told me to stop by his shop sometime and meant it. Driving home that evening, I realized I'd laughed more in 4 hours than I had in the 4 months before it. The week after that, I started volunteering Thursdays at a shop downtown that fixes up donated cars for veterans getting back on their feet, brakes and alternators, and the occasional transmission swap. I'd come home filthy every Thursday and lighter every Friday morning. Funny thing about fixing something for a stranger, it reminds you you're still worth something at the exact moment your own family seems to have forgotten it. About a month after the birthday party, Kayla called. "Where have you been?" she asked. "You've been hard to reach." "Out," I said. "Fishing some, volunteering some." Long pause. "You never told me any of that." "You never asked," I said. Silence on the line, not angry, just unfamiliar. 30-some years I'd arranged my whole life around everybody else's calendar. Now they had to find room in mine, and neither one of us knew that new dance yet. One evening, without really planning to, I pulled a legal pad across my kitchen table and wrote my daughter a letter. Not an angry one. The true one, about her mother, about how scared I'd been every day since we lost Donna, about why I kept swallowing every little insult because somewhere along the way I'd convinced myself that standing up for my own dignity was the same thing as losing my daughter's love. Near the bottom, my pen wrote a line that surprised even me. "I never needed you to choose between your husband and your father. I only needed you to notice when somebody treated your father like he didn't matter." I stared at that sentence a long while, because it was true, and true things carry weight. Then I folded it up, sealed it, wrote her name on the front, and put it in my desk drawer. She wasn't ready for it. Maybe I wasn't either, not yet. A few days later, Walter leaned on my fence while I was washing the truck. "Heard the latest?" he said. "Your son-in-law's telling people you've been acting strange. Confused is the word going around." I laughed. "That's a new one." "This part is," Walter said. "He's organizing some kind of family sit-down. Says he wants to clear the air." Neither of us believed that for 1 second. 2 nights later, Kayla called, voice careful. "Danny wants everybody together Sunday at our place to work things out. Will you come?" I looked out across my backyard, the maple tree throwing its long evening shadow the way it does that time of year, and I noticed something I hadn't expected to notice. I wasn't dreading it. I wasn't going there to defend myself, or argue, or audition for anybody's respect. That season of my life was already over. I just hadn't said it out loud yet. "I'll be there," I said, calm as a Sunday. She exhaled, like she'd been holding her breath. "Thank you, Dad." And then I made one more call. "Marion," I said, "I think it's time." She didn't ask time for what. She just said, "I'll meet you there." That Sunday came in warm and bright, the kind of afternoon made for a cookout. And instead, I drove out to Perrysburg with my attorney's sedan trailing in my rearview mirror, and the strangest passenger rode along with me the whole way, which was peace. A month before, I'd have rehearsed every argument the whole drive over. That day, there was nothing left to rehearse. The truth doesn't need practice. Marion stepped out with her slim briefcase and asked, "Ready? We're not here to fight." "I know," I said. "We're just done pretending." Everybody was already gathered when we walked in. Kayla, Danny, his parents, my sister Pam, even Walter, who I'd learn later Danny had specifically invited because word had gotten to him that Walter witnessed the mower, and he wanted him, in his words, managed. The whole room went quiet when Marion and I walked through that door. Danny clocked the briefcase right off and let out a laugh. "You brought a lawyer? Seriously?" "I brought a woman who's very good with paperwork," I said. "Pleasant as you like." His grin got wider. "Wow, dramatic much." Kayla's eyes were searching my face. "Dad, what is this?" "I believe," I said. Danny wanted to clear the air. "I do," Danny announced, planting himself by the fireplace, hands in his pockets, hosting his own little intervention. We've all been uncomfortable since the party. Nobody's saying it, so I will. I think Ray owes everybody in this room an apology. Ray. Not Dad. Not even Mr. Doyle. Funny how respect leaves a family one word at a time, same way it arrived, one word at a time, years back. Marion glanced at me. I gave her the smallest nod, and the briefcase opened. What's that? Danny said, smile still holding on by its fingernails. Marion's voice was the same one I'd heard across her desk for 18 years, level and unhurried and entirely certain of itself. Mr. Doyle asked me here today because some misunderstandings have developed regarding his estate and his future care. Danny laughed once. What estate? Marion didn't even look up. Over the past several weeks, we've completed a comprehensive plan. One folder onto the coffee table, a revocable living trust. Second folder, updated medical directives. Third folder, revised durable power of attorney and an independent professional trustee unrelated to the family. The temperature in that room changed all at once. Kayla blinked. You did all this? I did, I said. I didn't know, she said, quiet. I know you didn't, I said gently. Danny crossed his arms. I don't see why we're even discussing this. Marion looked directly at him for the first time since we'd walked in. I think you do. And for the first time all afternoon, Danny stopped smiling. Marion folded her hands. Some months back, she said, this office received a call. General questions. Kayla's head turned. What questions? Marion kept her eyes right on Danny. About guardianship. About how an elderly homeowner might lose control of his own finances. About whether a house's ownership changes when its owner enters assisted living. Kayla's head turned the rest of the way, slow, toward her husband. You called Dad's attorney. Those were hypothetical, Danny said, too fast. I'm sure they were, Marion said pleasantly. I work in insurance, Danny said, louder now. I ask about legal stuff for clients all the time. Thousands of people work in insurance, Marion agreed. They don't typically phone their father-in-law's personal attorney to ask how an old man loses his house. Nobody in that room breathed for a second. Danny's father was studying the carpet, his mother's hands folded and unfolded in her lap, and my daughter looked at her husband like a stranger had just unzipped his face right in front of her. Why? Danny threw his hands up. You're all making this sound way worse than it is. I was thinking ahead, that's all. For what? Kayla said, and her voice cracked right down the middle. For our future. And my daughter took one slow step backward, actual physical steps away from her own husband, and said the sentence I know I'll hear in my head for the rest of my life. My father's future is not your investment plan. The room went dead silent. Danny looked around for backup, his parents, my sister, and found nothing but floorboards and folded hands. Then Walter cleared his throat from the corner. I saw the mower thing, he said, and every head in that room turned. That wasn't just some accident showing off. That's ridiculous, Danny snapped. Walter didn't raise his voice. Men like Walter never need to. I've known Ray 15 years, he said, looking Danny dead in the eye. You backed that mower right over that girl's scooter on purpose and then told her she was embarrassing herself. And I heard you a couple weeks before that too, out in your own driveway. Danny's face lost its color by degrees, like a screen going dark. Ray's not going to be driving much longer, Walter recited, slow and clear. And when he can't handle that house, it's basically already ours. Kayla turned back to her husband one final time, her voice barely above a whisper. You told me that was a joke, that everybody's blowing this way out of proportion. It wasn't a joke, Danny started. It's just real estate people talk like that. It doesn't mean... It wasn't a joke, she said again, not a question this time. And that's when I stood up, not out of anger. I wanted the whole room to hear this next part at a plain, ordinary volume. I didn't come here today to embarrass anybody, I said. I came because I spent 31 years building a life with my wife. Every board on that porch, every brick, I laid with my own 2 hands. I looked at my daughter. I wanted my retirement to be about fishing and old cars and Sunday dinners with the people I love. Instead, I spent 6 weeks figuring out whether I needed to defend my own front door. Nobody interrupted me. I never cared about that mower, I said, turning to Danny. I cared that you thought it was funny to humiliate a 7-year-old at her own birthday party. And I cared even more, this part especially, that somewhere along the way, I let myself believe keeping the peace meant swallowing disrespect. I was wrong about that. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, and it wasn't tense either. It was just honest, maybe the first fully honest silence that family had shared in a long, long time. Marion clicked her briefcase shut. "I believe our business here is finished," she said. Nobody stopped us on the way to the door. Behind me, I heard Kayla say one word. "Dad." I turned around, and my daughter stood there with 100 sentences jammed up in her throat, none of them able to move. Then she just started to cry. I gave her a small, sad smile, and I walked out into the sunshine. In the driveway, Marion asked how I was feeling. I started up the truck and hunted around for the right word. "Lighter," I said finally. She nodded like a woman who'd seen that particular kind of lighter plenty of times before. "That's what happens," she said, "when people finally put down what was never theirs to carry in the first place." I drove home with the windows down for the first time in longer than I could remember. And here's the lesson that whole afternoon taught me, the one I want you to actually take with you. Boundaries aren't walls you build to keep people out. They're the paperwork of self-respect. And the folks who get angriest about them are always the ones who had plans for your open door. Life didn't turn to sunshine and roses after that meeting, not right away. Real life hardly ever does. I still woke up at 6 most mornings out of habit. My knee still complained on the basement stairs. Donna's chair still sat empty in the front room where it always had. Some things don't just fix themselves because you finally told the truth out loud. 3 days later, Kayla called. I let it ring through, not out of spite. I just didn't have the words yet, and I went out and mowed my own lawn instead. A week after that, she knocked on my door. She looked worn thin, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back fast, no armor on at all. She looked like the little girl who used to come home swallowing tears after a lost softball game. "Can I come in?" she asked. "Course you can," I said, and put on a pot of coffee. She sat down at my kitchen table, and we didn't touch the coffee for a good 5 minutes. Then she said, "I didn't know, Dad." "I believe you," I said. "But that's not the whole truth," she said, staring down into her cup. "I heard the little comments over the years. I saw the jokes he made. I just kept telling myself they were small." "They were small," I said softly. "One at a time." She looked up at me, eyes filling, but together they were a direction. I put my hand over hers on that table and told her the truest thing I had in me. "You loved your husband." "I still do," she whispered. "I know," I said, "and I love you." "I know that too," she said, and she cried the quiet kind of crying that comes from finally setting a weight down. When she left, she hugged me harder than she had in years, and I let myself hope, just a little, that we'd turned some kind of corner. We hadn't. Not yet. 2 weeks after that, she was back, angry this time, not at me exactly, more at the wreckage of the whole thing. "Danny says everybody ganged up on him," she said. "He says," Walter exaggerated. "He says your lawyer ambushed him." I said nothing to any of it. Then came the question she'd actually driven over to ask. "Can't we just move past this?" I looked at my daughter a long moment. Then I walked over to my desk, opened the top drawer, and took out that envelope with her name written on the front. "I wrote this a while back," I said. She reached for it, and I gently drew it back. "Not yet," I told her. Her face fell. "Dad, why not?" "Because you're not ready for it yet," I said. "And because right now, sweetheart, you're still trying to manage everybody else's pain instead of your own." She wiped her eyes. "I don't know what to do." "You don't have to figure it out today," I told her. Another month rolled by. Summer leaned into the first cool edges of fall, the maple out front starting to go gold around the top. Thursdays still belonged to the veterans shop. Saturdays still belonged to Walter and whatever swap meet was closest that week. For the first time since Donna passed, I noticed I wasn't just passing my days anymore. I was spending them. Then one cool afternoon in October, a third knock came at my door. Kayla stood on the porch alone, and something in her face had gone calmer, older, cleaner somehow. She sat down and said 2 words. I left. I didn't ask for the details. She gave me the one that mattered most anyway. I asked him one question, she said. "I asked if he would have treated you that way if Mom were still alive." She smiled the saddest smile I think I've ever seen on her. "He couldn't answer me, Dad." Not one word. I closed my eyes a second for Donna mostly. And then Kayla said the sentence that told me my daughter had finally come all the way back to me. "I spent years telling myself I was keeping the peace," she said, "but all I was really doing was asking you to carry all of it by yourself." Then she surprised me. She got up, walked over to my refrigerator, and pulled out a package wrapped in butcher paper. "I stopped at the market on the way," she said. "2 ribeyes. Planning on staying for dinner?" I asked. "If you'll let me help," she said. And for the first time since her mother died, somebody stood beside me at that grill instead of waiting at the table for it. The coals crackled, the fat started popping, and my daughter reached into the drawer for Donna's old recipe box, pulled out the seasoning card, and squinted at the faded blue ink. "Salt goes on an hour ahead," it says here. "Your mother would be proud of you for reading that," I said, and my voice didn't quite hold all the way through. She laughed through a couple of tears. "I finally get why these dinners mattered so much to you." "So do I said, now more than ever. When the steaks were ready, she carried my plate out to me herself, both hands, set it down careful in front of me, looked me right in the eye, and said 6 words. "Eat it while it's hot, Dad." I don't think she'll ever fully know the size of that sentence. Months earlier, somebody knocked a cake to the ground and crushed a little girl's scooter to show a whole backyard full of people exactly what my quiet was worth. Now my own daughter was standing guard over my supper. No speech, no ceremony to it, just respect, served warm. Sometimes that's the whole banquet, right there. She and Danny divorced quietly the following spring. No courtroom fireworks, nothing to celebrate on my end either, honestly. I felt more grief over it than victory. No father dreams of watching his daughter's marriage come apart. But I learned something out of the whole business that I don't think I'll ever unlearn, which is that a family can't survive very long when respect only ever flows in one direction. These days, Sunday dinner still happens at my place most weeks. The guest list runs shorter than it used to. Some Sundays it's just Kayla and Ellie and me. Some weeks Walter wanders over, or a couple of the fellas from the veterans shop stop by after church. The table's not as full as it once was, but the laughter in that kitchen is real, and nobody sitting at it is performing for anybody else anymore. Every so often I catch myself glancing out past the fence at that retention pond, and I think about a $600 lawnmower still sitting down there in the mud somewhere. What stayed with me wasn't the splash. It was everything I finally understood after it. I used to believe protecting my family meant absorbing whatever they handed me, no matter how it landed. I don't believe that anymore. Getting older doesn't make a man worth less. It just means he's finally logged enough miles to tell the difference between love and obligation. And once you learn to tell those two things apart, friend, I promise you the whole road gets a lot lighter to drive. So here's the one thing I'd ask you to actually try this week, and it doesn't cost you a thing. Next time somebody's little joke lands on you, same target one more time, say one calm sentence back, out loud. That one lands on me, not with me, just once. No anger behind it, just information. You'll learn everything you need to know from whatever happens right after. And here's the question I'd leave sitting on your table tonight, the one I chewed on for 6 years too long myself. How much of what you've been calling keeping the peace is really just you keeping quiet? Now it's your turn, because I've second-guessed that splash 100 times since. Put a 1 in the comments if you think the mower in the pond was exactly the right call, one quiet answer to years of noise. Put a 2 if you think I should have used my words that day instead of $600 of somebody else's lawn equipment. Put a 3 if you think I waited entirely too long, and the real mistake was 6 years of swallowed jokes before it. Some nights I'd vote 3 myself, if I'm being honest with you. Tell me where in the world you're listening from tonight, and what time it is where you are. It still gets me how far these backyard stories travel. And if you've ever been the one at the table everybody's just kidding about, or the parent whose kids forget to ask if you're doing all right, tell me about it down there too. Somebody reading this tonight is rehearsing an apology for something that was done to them, and they need to hear from somebody that they're allowed to put it down.